Good afternoon and welcome to today's ASSA ABLOY Academy virtual instructor-led training on calculating occupant loads and egress width. My name is Katie Flower. I will be your lead instructor for today. Today's session is being recorded and within 24 hours will be posted on the ASSA ABLOY Academy website on the same page that you register for virtual instructor-led training. Top right-hand corner, you can click on the link to view any of the recorded sessions, and you can view them as frequently as you need to or want to. Also, within 24 hours, you will receive an email thanking you for your attendance, and it will be your proof of attendance for a 1-hour credit for any continuing education that you may need. Most places will accept that as self-reporting, and you don't need a certificate. You can just use that email as your proof of attendance. If you have any questions during today's session, please feel free to use the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. You can type in your question at any time. I'll be watching for them, but we will also reserve a little bit of time at the end for any questions that you may have. We've got a lot to cover today. We'll start off with the difference between codes and standards. A standard is a set of criteria by which everything else is measured or compared. Some of the standards that we use in this industry to select the appropriate code compliant hardware and doors are NFPA 80, the standard for fire doors, and ANSI A117.1, which is the standard for making doors and hardware accessible to meet the requirements of ADA. A standard by itself doesn't do much. It needs to be referenced by the code. The building code is updated on a 3-year cycle. But until that specific edition of the code is adopted into law, either in whole or in part by your state, city, or other jurisdiction, it isn't in effect. So for example, the 2021 version of the IBC has been out for a little over a year now, and only one state, to my knowledge, has adopted it to this point. So the egress calculator, when you use it, will have a drop-down menu so that you can select your appropriate version of the IBC based on your project state. If you're not sure, or if you don't have a life safety plan, this website, www.iccsafe.org, is an excellent tool to bookmark, and you can look up and search for the state to find out which edition of the IBC is in effect. Some definitions that we need to understand and make sure that we're on the same page before we get into using the egress calculator. The definition of means of egress. In Chapter 2 of the IBC, they give a bunch of different definitions, but one of the most important ones is to understand that a means of egress is a continuous, unobstructed path of both vertical and horizontal egress travel from any occupied portion of a building or structure to a public way or safety. It consists of 3 separate, distinct parts. The exit access is that portion from an occupied area of the building until you reach the exit. So it's the beginning path of your means of egress. The exit can be a vertical exit enclosure, the stair. It could be a horizontal exit, which separates the building into 2 large fire compartments. Or it could be the exit door at the bottom of the stair or the main exit out of the building. Exits can be doors. They can also be exit passageways, exit ramps, but you have a level of protection once you reach the exit. And then the last part of a means of egress is the exit discharge from the termination of an exit to the public way, which you have to travel a minimum of 10 feet without any covering or portion of the building so that you're reaching safety. A minimum of 2 exits are required from most spaces. IBC is an exceptional code, and there are exceptions to this. The egress calculator will point those out on each of the occupancy types, but unless by exception, when you have 1 to 500 people, you need a minimum of 2 exits from each story or exit access from a space. 501 to 1,000 people will be 3 minimum, and more than 1,000, you need a minimum of 4. And the number of exits is calculated based on the occupant the square footage of the area under consideration, and the occupancy type, how that room or space or building is actually being used. There, as I mentioned, there are some exceptions that allow for one exit or one exit access door, and that would be in table 1006.2.1, and there's a lot of different factors involved in that. The occupancy types, the way the building is used, the way the space is used is very important in determining the occupant load of that space. These are the different ones that are most common in commercial construction. We'll talk about each one a little bit in just a second. The code is written around ordinary risk, ordinary hazard, and then it's modified either by exception for lower risk occupancies, or it's made more restrictive for higher risk occupancies. And that will affect your door hardware decisions. And the egress calculator can help with that, because under each occupancy type, under the tab, once you do your calculations, there is a list of the different code references for your most common hardware and door and firewall type questions that you might have, and the references of where you can find those in the IBC. Ordinary risk occupancies include Group B business, which is for the transaction of professional services. It also includes colleges and universities. Group M mercantile is for selling merchandise, very, very similar to Group B business, but instead of selling professional services, you're now selling materials. And Group R residential includes hotels, apartment buildings, dormitories, and similar type housing buildings, commercial housing buildings. So this is what the code is written around. And then if there's a higher risk occupancy, for example, Group A assembly is one of the high risk occupancies. That's when you have 50 or more people gathering together for such purposes as civic, social, religious functions, recreation, entertainment, food or drink consumption, or awaiting transportation. This would include restaurants, nightclubs, auditoriums, movie theaters, football stadiums, and different rooms within buildings like a dining room or a multi-purpose room, areas where you have 50 or more people for those purposes. And it could even include a training room in a facility. So we're always looking for mixed occupancies that have Group A assembly intermingled with another occupancy type. Group E educational is also high risk. It is K through 12, including nursery school and some daycare. And when you're dealing with young school-age children, even though they have fire drills and they're familiar with their surroundings, they are prone to panic if there is a fire. And Group H is high hazard. Regardless of the occupant load, it is high risk, even though it's not normally occupied space. And the low risk occupancies, where you will see a lot of exceptions when it comes to locking doors on the egress side, for example, are Group I institutional. I1 is assisted living facilities, I2 hospitals and nursing homes, I3 detention and correctional facilities, and I4 adult and child daycare. What these all have in common is that the people are not capable of self-preservation without the physical assistance of a staff member to help them evacuate or move to an area of refuge if there is a fire. And so some assisted living facilities are not designated as I1. Those would be a residential occupancy. You have to make sure to look at, are they under 24-hour care and supervision, and are they capable or not capable of self-preservation? I mentioned mixed occupancy earlier, and this is one where you can really use the egress calculator to determine whether you need exit devices or whether you can use delayed egress or whether you can use manual sliding doors, all of those kind of things. A mixed occupancy is when you have two or more different occupancy types that share the same building. If they share the same egress requirements, for example, an auditorium that has 300 people and shares the same exit access corridor as other classrooms that are under 50 people in a college or university setting, instead of Group B business, we would have to select our hardware based on the more restrictive requirements of Group A assembly because they're intermingled and they're using the same egress components. You can also have a mixed occupancy of 2 or more occupancy types sharing the same building, but they're separated and have their own exits, their own exit access, or they're protected with fire barriers and opening protectives, fire door assemblies, in order to keep them separate and they don't share the same egress components. Then you would apply the code based on each type individually instead of the more restrictive requirements. Chapter 10 is means of egress in the IBC, and it tells us that unless by exception, we need 32 inches minimum clear, and that is measured with the door open 90 degrees from the face of the door to the face of the stop. It does not take into consideration the hardware because it gives you a 4-inch buffer zone. This is very similar. It's exactly the same as the ADA requirements. If you do have an I2 occupancy, which is hospitals and nursing homes, in areas that are used for the movement of beds, the minimum clear width is 41.5 inches, and you'll need to apply that to the egress calculator because it's an exception. If you know that it's an I2 occupancy for the movement of beds, make sure to make that adjustment. And it is shown on the occupancy tab so that it kind of reminds you to do that. Egress doors shall be of the pivoted or side hinge swinging type, and they need to swing in the direction of egress travel when serving an area or space of 50 or more people, and that is regardless of the occupancy type. When you have 50 or more people, the door swings out. It makes it much easier for everybody to push the door open rather than try to pull the door open. And in Group H, high hazard occupancy, regardless of the occupant load, the door needs to swing out in the direction of egress. Now let's take a look at how to use the egress calculator. This is the new ASSA ABLOY egress calculator website, and I want to show you how to navigate the first couple of screens. On the top left, there is a menu. You can link to ASSA ABLOY Academy for all of our online courses and virtual instructor-led training, as well as find any training in your area once we go back to traveling. Also, you can download the Excel versions of the egress calculator here. They will still be kept up to date in place for your use. Door Security Solutions, ASSA ABLOY Door Security Solutions has all kinds of products if you're interested. And then our ASSA ABLOY Architectural Services, if you are an architect or contractor in need of a specification, you can click this link and it will show you who the team is, who to contact, and our code resource guide can be downloaded here. The Overview tab lets you know that this application is a tool in assisting not just architects and consultants, but ASSA ABLOY employees, contractors, anybody in the door openings industry that has anything to do with checking occupant load, egress width, door swing, selecting hardware, any of those kinds of things. It will help you determine the occupancy use and type of a building so that you can properly select the appropriate hardware. It will help you calculate the occupant load for a room or space and for each occupancy type based on the formulas in IBC. It will help you calculate the minimum clear opening width of doors from a room or space. You can determine the swing direction of doors from a room or space and determining the minimum number of exits and exit access doors from a room or space. This tool additionally has notes that will help you select the appropriate hardware. It is not meant to be in place of having your own copy of the IBC. You still need to have a copy of the code book to look up the references and to apply things like travel distance to exits, separation of exits, common path of travel, and things like that. This tool does not help you with those items, but you can always buy a copy of the IBC from iccsafe.org, whether it's in PDF or hard copy format. This is
Next, the occupancy use type tab, you click on it. And if you need to review your occupancy type, we've already gone through and talked about what is a Group A assembly. But this gives you a reminder of what an assembly occupancy is. It also goes through and lists more in-depth examples for each type. You can scroll down and remind yourself what a Group B business occupancy is. Educational, factory. Once you have determined the occupancy type, then you will be able to go in and select the appropriate calculator.
A couple more definitions before we get into some examples and exercises. The gross floor area is the area inside the perimeter of the exterior walls of the building, and it's exclusive of vent shafts, courts, without deduction for corridors, stairways, ramps, closets, the thickness of interior walls, columns, or other features. If the calculator doesn't say to use net floor area, then gross floor area is the default. That matches what's in the IBC as well. The net floor area is the actual occupied area that's not including any unoccupied accessory areas like corridors, stairways, ramps, toilet rooms, mechanical rooms, and closets. The egress calculator is based on Chapter 10 of the IBC, Section 1004, Occupant Load. And there is a table, Table 1004.1.2, that areas without fixed seating will be based on. And that is how the calculator will function. You'll put in the size of the room and select the appropriate occupancy type. It will calculate everything for you.
The drop-down menus in the egress calculator are the same as the ones on Table 1004.1.2 in the International Building Code. They are just arranged by occupancy type, but that does not mean you can only use that occupancy type for that function of space. For example, the educational occupancy calculator is typically educational as K through 12, including nursery schools and some daycare. But a classroom that is found in another occupancy, let's say a training room or something like that, is not under the assembly occupancy tab. You won't find training room in here because there's nothing listed on this table about training rooms. But because it's a educational classroom area, you would use that calculator to get the appropriate number of people. And then you can go from there. If the number of people is over 50, then it does become Group A assembly and would become a mixed occupancy with the business or the residential or whatever else it's being mixed with. But if we look at the assembly occupancy calculator, you see assembly here. If you have fixed seats, you can go to the fixed seats and just put in the number of fixed seats. If you have concentrated assembly, you would use this one. And the values in the calculator here will be the same as concentrated use chairs only, which is 7 net square foot per person. If you go with standing space, then you would use this one, and that corresponds to the standing space, the 5 net square foot per person. If you go to the unconcentrated use, that's the same as here, unconcentrated tables and chairs, 15 net square foot per person. Even though you don't see that, this calculator is based on this table in the IBC. If you ever have any question as to what these values are, you can always go to Table 1004 in the IBC and find them. Library, reading rooms, and stack areas. Because library can be assembly, I put it under this tab. So library reading rooms are net, which matches up with library reading rooms net. It's 50 net per person, net square feet per person. The stack area, library stack areas could also be assembly, and that's 100 gross. For this one, I did put this under the educational occupancy as well, because you do have libraries within educational quite frequently. So for ease of use, I did try to combine some of these into the more common calculator. But if we go to mercantile, for example, mercantile gives us area on other floors. Mercantile, that would be the 60 gross square foot per person. Our other option would be the storage, stock areas and shipping areas, and that would be following this storage stock, 300 gross per person. So if I were to type in 3,000 square feet and calculate, my occupant load is 10, which it should be, because 3,000 divided by 100, 3,000 divided by 300 gives us the 10. And that's exactly how this calculator works. It is based on the area in the table 1004.1.2 for calculating occupant loads.
I mentioned mixed occupancies a couple of times already, but this is where the egress calculator can be very, very helpful. A Group A assembly occupancy can find its way into pretty much any occupancy type. And I consider these red flag areas that if you calculate and you get to 50 or more people, they will be considered assembly. It's not all spaces, just those that are used to meet the definition of assembly for eating, drinking, civic, social purposes, things like training rooms, etc. So using the unconcentrated assembly at 15 net square foot per person, you would use that for things like conference rooms, just to verify if you are at 50 or more, or if it's less than 50, then it becomes incidental to the business occupancy or whatever type of occupancy that it belongs as part of. Lounges could potentially be Group A assembly. Balconies that are used for people to go out and have lunch or whatever could be considered assembly. Rooftop patios that are occupied and gathering together people. If you have 50 or more people, that would be considered assembly. And dining areas within any type of occupancy, if it's large enough to have 50 people, it would be assembly. Others that are considered concentrated assembly based on their use, and that's calculated at 7 net square foot per person, multi-purpose rooms, meeting rooms, ballrooms, banquet rooms. We see these types of rooms and spaces in hospitals, in hotels, in businesses. No matter what type of occupancy that these belong in, if you have 50 or more people, it becomes assembly, and you have to follow the hardware requirements for the more restrictive, the more risky occupancy, which is assembly, unless you have separation. The two more that you would use the educational calculator tab because of the use of space, the function of space, and it calculates at 20 net square foot per person, would be classrooms, training rooms, and lecture rooms. They're all very similar type spaces. I will note that the egress calculator version 2 is about to hit any day now, and I have added training rooms under the assembly occupancy tab from the 2015 edition on. I've also added the 2021 version of the IBC as a drop-down in the next version that you won't have to do anything. It'll just appear for you one day, anytime now. And then also under the educational calculator, but using 50 net square foot per person, would be training shops, laboratories, and other similar vocational use.
This is a hotel, and a hotel in and of itself is a residential occupancy, R1. You have your guest rooms. This is the first floor. But I want to look for any red flag areas. And in Bluebeam, if there's no dimensions, these dimensions don't really help me tell how big this fitness room is, the fitness center. And if I want to verify this in my egress calculator, first I have to calibrate. If you go to Tools and then you come down to Measure, you can calibrate the scale. I know this door is 3 feet wide, so if I click there and click there, then I can input that it's 3 foot and then hit Apply Scale. And now I can go back to the Tools and Measure and get the area. There's 2 ways I can get the area. I can just click on the corner and drag it out to the other corner and let go. And that tells me 678.55, which a fitness center, if we use the drop down, is an exercise room. And without sprinkler system, I can put in my room square footage. I'm just going to round it up to 679. Hit Add. And I can see my calculated occupant load is 14, which I know based on experience that with 14 people, this door can swing in, and I only need 1 exit access door, which is what this room has. So this is not an assembly occupancy. I'm less than 50, I'm sorry. And I can hit calculate, and it tells me that I need 2 exit access doors, 32 inches minimum clear. The door can swing in or out. However, if you scroll down to the assembly special notes and look down here, table 1015.1 says that 1 exit is permitted when an occupant load is 49 or less. We have less than 49 people. This fitness center can have the 1 exit access door, and we are good. But now I want to check to see if there's any other possible red flags. And as I scroll down, here's a meeting room. Now this meeting room could very easily be assembly. It's got 2 exit access doors, which leads me to believe that it is big enough. We can reset our calculator here, and I've already got my calibration, so I don't have to recalibrate again. I just go to Measure and Area, and a meeting room can be considered either concentrated assembly or less concentrated assembly. And since a meeting room could be used for either purpose, we have to go concentrated, because there could be times where somebody rents this meeting room and all they've got is chairs, and they have a lot more people than if they set it up more like tables and chairs. We have to go with concentrated chairs only instead of unconcentrated to figure out whether this is assembly. Without sprinkler, it's still checked. I've got my square footage as 868 and hit Add, and sure enough, I've got 124 people, which if I did this using unconcentrated and the same square footage, 868, I'm just gonna hit Add, that's 58. It's still going to be over the amount for assembly. Either way, let's hit clear. Well, we have to calculate, but let's hit reset because I don't want to have both of them in there. Let's just do for the concentrated. Go back here, 868, hit Add, and then calculate, which in fact tells me with 124 people, I do need 2 exit access doors, which I have. They need to be 32 inches minimum clear. These are 3-foot doors with 33 inches minimum clear, so I've got that. The doors do need to swing out. They do. Exit devices are required, and then any of my special hardware notes are down here. So if I'm writing the specification or detailing this, or if there is a hardware specification written, and this is anything other than an exit device. Now, if it's push-pull, let's say this door doesn't need to lock, push-pull would be acceptable if it's a non-fire rated door. But if it's a fire rated door, this door needs to latch, and an exit device here and here would be appropriate. But we follow our path of egress. That means we also need exit devices on this because we've got a mixed occupancy, residential mixed in with assembly. We also have this breakfast area, which looks like it's large enough to be considered assembly. So between these two, we definitely have mixed occupancy. This would need an exit device. These doors would need an exit device if they latch. This one for sure because it's an exterior door. And then to keep continuity, these doors on this end as well, even though they don't technically need it because our second exit is this door. This one needs an exit device. These sliding doors may or may not be factored into our egress capacity, but we have enough egress capacity with this one door and this corridor down here. But I would do the same thing for hardware and put exit devices here for continuity, symmetry, and the like. The second way to get the area using Bluebeam, first I'm going to calibrate because this is a different set of plans. So under Tools, go to Measure and then Calibrate. I know this is a 6-foot pair. So I'm going to put that in here, apply scale. And now this fitness center is not just a rectangle. So you go to Tools, Measure, and Area, and instead of clicking and dragging, now you click on this corner and then here, click again, here. We're getting the outline of this really crazy space, and just click it once at each of these locations. There, and then double click on the last one to set it. And that gives you the total square footage for the fitness center, and then you can put it into the egress calculator from there.
When it comes to egress width, other components and doors fall under that category, other egress components. If it's a non-sprinklered building, it would be calculated at 0.2 inches per person, and in a sprinklered building, 0.15 inches per person. This comes directly out of 1005.3.2 from the IBC. There is an exception. Group H, high hazard, and I2 are factored at 0.2 inches per person because they're already sprinklered spaces. And putting that into terms of how do I figure out how wide my doors need to be, a 36-inch wide door, since we're dealing with floor plans and we can't measure from the face of the door to the face of the stop, it's a very simple calculation. For single doors that are 1 3/4 commercial thick doors hung on either butt hinges, pivots, or continuous hinges in a hollow metal frame, a wood frame, or an aluminum frame, which pretty much is 99% of all the opening types you will deal with, subtract 3 inches from a single door to get the clear opening width. For example, the 36-inch wide door, which is most common in commercial construction, if we subtract 3 inches, we have 33 inches clear. And what is the capacity? If we take the 33 inches and divide it by 2.2 inches per person for a non-sprinkler building, that means that every 3-foot leaf has a capacity of 165 people. A pair of doors we're going to subtract 6 inches from, and that will take into consideration if you have a removable mullion or not. And so a 72-inch wide pair gives us 66 inches clear. Divided by 0.2 will give us 330 person capacity. So this is one exit, even though it's 4 door leaves, has a capacity for 660 people. And so I have other exits throughout this school. This is feeding a very large populated area, and that's why we have so many doors at the main entrance to accommodate the total occupant load, or actually 1/3, 1/2, depending on how many exits are required. Let's take a look at a few exercises to give a few more examples of how to use the calculator. The first one is a 2-story office building. There is no sprinkler system. It's new construction. I don't have any life safety plans. I'm writing the hardware specification. It's due in the morning. It's already late at night. I can't call anybody to verify. So I'm going to use the egress calculator to check doors A and B. Are they swinging in the right direction? Do I need exit devices? Let's take a look.
In this exercise, we have an office building, Group B business, with no sprinkler system. And the red flag area that we're looking at is this training area. Now, you won't find anything under the business occupancy tab for training areas, so you have to determine what is a training room similar to in our table 1004 from the IBC. And as I had mentioned before, educational occupancy calculator has classroom areas, and a classroom area is just like a training room. And so we have to use this to determine, do we have 50 or more people? Once we have 50 or more people in this training room, then we do have to consider it Group A assembly. These doors would need to swing out. We would need exit devices on these doors, as well as any other path of egress in this office building that intermingles with that same path of egress. Because a classroom is used a little bit differently than other areas of assembly, it's 20 square foot per person. I will go over here and enter 26 feet for my one dimension. My other one is 33. I hit add and calculate. My occupant load is 43 people, which is significantly under the 50, and therefore I should be fine with exactly how the architect has this drawn. I need 2 exit access doors, 32 inches minimum clear. These are 3 foot wide doors. The doors can swing either in or out. This one swings out, this one swings in. They're both completely fine, and exit devices are not required. If I scroll down and I take a look at the special notes based on educational occupancies, Table 1015.1 tells us that 1 exit is permitted when I have an occupant load of 49 or less. And that is indeed the case. So I can have 1 exit access door from this space. I don't even need the 2. I am in compliance. I can go forth with this project without exit devices on these doors, knowing that the quantity of exits, exit access, the widths, swing direction, everything is fine. An additional option, if I want to save this information, I can put the room name, drop down and select the date, put in the project name, and then I can save this information, download it into a PDF, and keep this in the project file for future reference. So if there's ever any question, why didn't you put exit devices on these doors? I can pull this up and say, that room was under 50 people, it's not assembly. I can have 1 exit and I did not need exit devices. You've got your justification for that in your file.
Next, we'll look at another office building, Group B business, with a multi-purpose room that looks like it's pretty big. So I wanted to take a look and see if it is Group A assembly or not.
Now, the multi-purpose room, it could be concentrated assembly with chairs only, not fixed, or it could be unconcentrated with tables and chairs. Because it's a multi-purpose room, we have to factor it based on concentrated use, worst case scenario. And you can see that there are 2 exit access doors, but the doors swing in. If this is large enough to have 50 people, these doors will need to swing out, and it will make it a mixed use occupancy between assembly and business, and our egress components will need to be updated accordingly. Let's input for concentrated use. Again, the reason we're doing that, a multi-purpose room, this is a big screen here. They could just have a bunch of chairs lined up in rows to look at some kind of video or something like that. And therefore, we have to use concentrated, put in our room size. It's 42 feet by 20. And you can go 20.1 or 20 point whatever, but let's just round up, hit add, and we have over 100 people. Calculate. I do need 2 exit doors, exit access doors, which I have. They need to be 32 inches minimum clear. These are 3 foot wide doors, so I have 33 inches clear. I'm compliant so far, except that these doors do need to swing out and they do require exit devices. I would have to inform the architect, can you please change the swing direction of these 2 doors? And then I'm going to have to put exit devices, not just here, but any path of egress out of the building. This is a 1-story building.
Conference rooms could be assembly, so we would check that first. But my question here is, can I use a manual right slide door for door number 101? If the room has 10 people or less, then I could use a manual sliding door. Let's take a look at how we would figure this one out.
There's two things we need to double check. First, is the conference room large enough to be considered an assembly occupancy? If there's 50 or more people in that conference room, then it would be considered assembly. So using the assembly occupancy calculator, a conference room is unconcentrated use, tables and chairs. We have 19 and 27 as our two different dimensions. Hit add and calculate. Our occupant load is 35. It is below 50, therefore it is not assembly. I can hit reset, and now I can figure out the actual occupant load based on the conference room being incidental to the business occupancy. It's an office building, and it's now considered an office area. I put in my same size, 19 by 27, hit add and calculate. And now I've got a calculated occupant load of 6, which is under 10, and therefore I can use a right slide, a manual sliding door for this opening.
Another office building. This one has a very large open office area. Let's take a look at this.
The next exercise asks for this business area, which is in gross square footage, do we have the appropriate number of exits? Do they swing in the correct direction, and are exit devices required? We have door A, which swings in, door B swings out, and door C swings out. We go to our business occupancy calculator because the open workstation area, the conference room, and these offices, this is business use space. This conference room is way too small. It's not assembly. There is no assembly in this space. So let's take a look with business areas because it's not accessory storage areas. We want business areas. Our scenario is without sprinkler system, and we know how many square feet. I input 6,000, I hit add, I hit calculate. I have 60 occupants, which means that the doors do need to swing out. But because this is a business occupancy, you can see that exit devices, panic and fire exit hardware is not required. This is actually 50 or more, then the doors do need to swing out. I need a minimum number of 2 exit access doors. So B and C comply with that. Door A can swing in. It's not a exit. There wouldn't be a lighted exit sign above here, but these 2 doors meet your requirements for means of egress, and you don't need exit devices on any of those 3 doors.
The question comes up all the time. Why do I not need an exit device in a business occupancy? I have 60 people, so I'm exceeding 50. Why do I not need an exit device? Take a look at these 2 pictures, and I think it becomes very clear. Both of these spaces are the same size. They're both about 6,000 square feet. So the business occupancy on the left is going to have the cubicles. That's what an open office area is. It will have cubicles with desks, and they allow 100 square foot per person. So a 10 foot by 10 foot cubicle, or very similar in size and space. Plus you have very clear open path to the exits in a business occupancy. The open office, you can see right down that straight shot to get to the exit. The other thing is that not everybody will reach the exit at the same time in a business occupancy. The person that is in this cubicle will get over to this exit a lot later than the person that's in the cubicle that's closest. So you don't have a mad crowd of people that are panicking and pushing and shoving, trying to reach the exit at the same time, like you would with this nightclub bar, restaurant bar, or any other type of assembly. Assembly has large population of people, and they're gathered together for entertainment purposes, for food consumption, all of those kind of things that they're not related by blood, and they're more prone to panic if there is an emergency. And plus, besides the fact that there isn't a real clear pathway to get to the exit, you have other things besides people, like the tables and the chairs. Chairs could get knocked over, blocking your path. You've got to try to get over the chair without being tripped. That's why assembly is such high risk. In this next one, we've got a hotel with meeting rooms, and the meeting rooms have operable partitions. So now let's take a look at how we would determine the occupant load for each individual room, and then what happens when we open up the partition and use it as a large room.
In this exercise, we have a hotel, which is a group R1 residential occupancy, but these are some meeting rooms, which is pretty common. You'll find them typically on the first floor of a hotel if they have meeting space. And we see the operable partition separating each one of these meeting rooms. The way that we need to calculate this to double check, do we need exit devices on these doors, is each of these meeting rooms individually, and then what is the total when all of these operable partitions are open and they use it as one overall large space. A meeting room, if it's going to be assembly, if it's large enough to be assembly, would have to be calculated on concentrated use, chairs only, not fixed, instead of unconcentrated use. Because meeting rooms can be used in either configuration. You could have just all chairs, or you could have a combination of tables and chairs. So let's go with concentrated use. It is a full sprinkler system, so we need to check that. And our first room length is 26 by 42. So 26 by 42, and I hit add. Then I can add another function of space, which would be the second one. Before I do, I want to take a look. I've got 156 people just in this space alone. And I could hit calculate and see that I do need a minimum of 2 exits from this space, exit access doors, which I have, one here and one here. My minimum is 32 inches. So I do not, with this occupant load, go over the minimum clear. This pair of doors is bigger than what we need, but I'm sure that it's symmetrical, and it's probably needed once you get to the full space. Because of that, I know that these other two are going to be very similar. This isn't that much larger. I may have another 20 people or so, which will still be within the 2 exit access doors and the same parameters here. Let's go ahead and now add our next function of space. We've still got concentrated use. The next one is 32 by 42, and hit add. And then this, when I hit calculate, will total these together. We did have an extra almost 40 more people here. And if you wanted to, you could calculate it now and see that if both of these were open, this open and both of these used, and this were closed, I would still need 2 exits or exit access doors. I still need 32 inches per exit access, but a total of 52 inches, 52.2 total between all of my exit access, which I do have. But let's add in the third one. It's still concentrated use. Our third one is 27 by 42. Hit add, calculate, and that one is 162. So each one of these rooms is very close to the same size, but now my total is 510. I need a minimum of 3. When all of these partitions are open and I'm using it as one large space, I need a minimum of 3 exit access doors, which I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Each one needs 2. We have it. The total needs 3. We have it. The minimum clear per exit is 32 inches, and the total clear egress capacity width 76.5. My minimum main entrance, and since I don't really have a main entrance, that's why each of those is a pair. We could do that with a single 4-foot leaf, but this architect chose to go with pairs, which is fine. It exceeds what we need. And exit devices are required in every scenario because each one of these is over 50 people. And our assembly special notes, we can see if we have certain types of hardware and what my IBC references are so that I could go look them up.
That is how we use the egress calculator. If you have any questions, I haven't seen any so far, please feel free to type them into chat. Here is where you can get access to the egress calculator for yourself. Please bookmark it so that you've got it handy. It's egresscalc.assaabloy.com. It's great to use on your desktop, your tablet, or your smartphone. It is friendly to be mobile, and it's based on the IBC. The new version coming out any day now will include the 2021 edition of the IBC, and the other editions are anywhere from the 2006 edition all the way to the 2021 when the new one comes out. Right now it stops at 2018, but the other one will be out any day now. You can download and save your input and output data, including those code references, in PDF form, and it's free for whether you're an ASSA ABLOY employee using the single sign-on. If you're an ASSA ABLOY customer, you can get there via Connect, and there's a free guest login if you don't have either. Another thing I'd like to show you, if you'd like, Code Corner with Katie on YouTube is part of the Door Hardware Nerds channel. If you like and subscribe, there will be monthly episodes that will answer your code questions. There's been 5 episodes so far. Each video is between 2 to 6 minutes in length. So just a real short, sweet, here's a code question, here's the answer. And it's also useful if you need to answer somebody else's code question. You can share the link and say, here's the topic that's being discussed, and it's exactly the same question that you had. If you have any questions that you can't think of today, but you have them down the road, feel free to reach out to me at catherine.flower@assaabloy.com. I'd be happy to help answer your code questions, or if you've got something that you think will enhance the egress calculator once you get a chance to use it in day-to-day work, feel free to just drop me a note and say, hey man, I'd really like for you to add training rooms under the assembly occupancy tab. It'll just make it that much easier. And we try to listen and do it. It's not something that we update frequently, but on the next update, I will consider it. I don't see any questions, so I want to thank you for participating. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving next week. Be safe. And I'll see you again at another ASSA ABLOY virtual instructor-led training, hopefully sometime in the near future. Thanks, everyone.